Go.
Greetings everybody, a good month, a good year, a good life from the Holy Apple in the Holy Land. First day, you got it, first day of the 12th month, Adar 5779. Greetings to one and all. Okay, hope you brought along for this class your seatbelts, your weekly seatbelts. Today we're also with Hashem's help, with God's help, we're going to hit it out of the ballpark. We're going to play some hardball here, none of this softball jive. And the topic of today's class is Gillette. Toxin masculinity, question mark, or perhaps toxin America. A few weeks ago, there was an advertisement that was taken out in America. So far, I think approximately 28 million people have seen the advertisement by Gillette. It's caused a big stir, you could say, to say the least, in America. Other places, people are threatening to boycott the Gillette company and go over to Schick, or no plug intended, you know. But different companies, I guess. I'm not big on the shaving, as you could see, so it's not really my forte what companies exist. But it's causing a big stir-up. So that's what for those that have not seen the advertisement by Gillette, it's an advertisement that shows mostly white males that are doing bad things. We have the ad shows these white males bullying people, harassing women. You see men going after women, all kinds of different situations, and it's called toxin masculinity. So this, of course, caught the attention of many people, and I said there's a boycott. And question is, how do we relate to such an indictment? Is there truth? Is there partial truth in it? How do we look at it? First, so let's start with a few things. Now, I happen to know who produced the advertisement, and the woman that produced the advertisement has a history of various presentations that she's put together which present the white male in a negative, in a bumbling, idiot, fool, wimp, sissy kind of light. So I understand that there is an agenda going on. I understand there's a war of ideas that are happening right now in America and in the world. There are groups out there, there are leftist groups that are trying to remove any, to blur differences between the genders. Everybody's equal, everybody's the same, there's no difference between men and women. There is an agenda to destroy the family all over the world. There's an agenda to destroy masculinity in its good sense. That I understand. There are many haters, self-haters we'll call them, self-haters in America that are Americans. I'm not coming from that angle at all. I'm not one of these, you know, they have in football, they have these knee bending, these football players that bend when they hear the national anthem oh say can we see, so they take a knee. I think it's called taking a knee. So I'm not one of these taking of the knee people, and I have there are a lot of good things that are in America, and there are a lot of people out there that are from within trying to destroy the greatness that was once America. So I'm trying to look at America straight on, look at it in the mirror. As I said, there are many good points. Today we're going to be looking in the mirror and seeing where are the foundations, where are the roots of America. If we want to understand what we see today in America, we have to go back. Not only do we have to go back to before 1776 in the Revolution, American Revolution, War of Independence, we have to go back further, and we'll take it from the father of Western civilization, Esav. Very interesting. If you ever look, USA is spelled backwards. USA is Esav. So, because the real pronunciation of the Hebrew letter of Vav is really Esau. USA spelled backwards. So it's not by chance that the father of Western culture, as we know, the father of Rome, was of course none other than Isaac's son, Esav. So let's look. God wanted to give the Torah to the world. Before going to the Jewish people, God, so to speak, travels to the nations of the world and asks a representative of each nation, a diplomat, a statesman, ask them if they would like to receive the Torah. And every nation wanted to know, what does it say exactly in the book? What exactly am I going to, what exactly are the rules here? I want to know if I accept something, you have to read the fine print. So we want to give me an example of what the Torah says. Very interesting. They came up to Esav and they told Esav, thou shalt not kill. So Esav turns, so to speak, to God, and he says, not to kill. Our whole essence, our whole nature is based on killing. As it says, Isaac, Esav's father, when he realizes, when Esav comes before him, after Jacob receives the blessings, and he's crying, he says, give me a blessing. I gave all the blessings to Jacob. Isaac says, there are no blessings left. Please, give me something. And then Isaac says something very interesting. He says, you will live by the sword. You will live by the sword. So Esav turns to God and says, what are you talking about? Our nature, our essence is the essence of killing, of violence. That's who we are. And this Torah of yours goes against our nature. So forget it. And so each nation, God gave them a sample of what the Torah is, and they all refused to receive, except for the Jewish people. Now, Rav Alter, in his book Avot Ubanim, page 260, says an amazing thing. Says, what is the Torah trying to teach us? Torah is teaching us an important lesson here. The lesson is that the nature of the Jewish people, the soul of the Jewish people, is suited for the Torah. Is suited for the Torah. The Torah was created for the Jewish people. The Jewish people were created for the Torah. So even though many times a person might find themselves feeling coerced that he's observing or she's observing the Torah. Truth of the matter is, really, deep down, if we cut through the jive, if we cut through all of the spiritual dust that is gathered on our souls, we are really we are in sync with the Torah. However, the nations of the world, they are not. And even if they would have agreed to accept the Torah, this would not have lasted for a long period of time, because of the fact is that their nature is against, their nature is not in sync with what the Torah is saying. So either today, tomorrow, or a week from now, or a year from now, or 10 years from now, this match is going to break up. That's what he's telling us. So we see an amazing thing. Male, okay, toxin masculinity. The toxin, the real source of the toxin is in the nation of Esav, who represents the Western world. That's where it really lies. So if you're trying to put a finger on who's to blame and you're looking for the male figure, you're barking up it is true. There is a lot of toxin there, but we have to go to the source. Where does the trouble begin? And that's what we're going to do today with God's help. We're going to the beginning, to the source, and the beginning, the root and source of America. Okay, number 2. We know that, on one hand, Esav, the Western world, was given. They lived by the sword. That is what was told to Esav. Now, the commentators say, what kind of blessing is this? Isaac is going to give Esav a blessing that he should live by the sword? What is this, a positive characteristic trait? It's something negative. So the commentators tell us something amazing. That Isaac was not blessing Esav. What Isaac was doing, he was looking into the being, into the soul, so to speak, of Esav and his generations and his descendants for all time. And he looked and he saw that their essence is living by the sword. On the other hand, the Jewish people are the exact opposite. The Jewish people, for example, we are told in the Talmud that in the beginning of the book of Exodus, we are told that 2 Jews were arguing and fighting. One was Datan and Aviram. And one lifted up a hand against the other. Moses sees this. Moses sees a Jew not hitting, lifting up a hand. And he calls him wicked. So the Talmud says, why is he wicked? He just lifted up his hand. Can you imagine going into a court? Someone's charging you with violence or, beating up somebody. And then there's a video of you. All you're doing is just like lifting up your hand. The judge is going to take that rap sheet, just going to rip it up and, throw in the garbage can. Get out of here. Guy lifted up his hand. No, that's not the way the Torah looks at it. Torah looks like it in a regular situation. We're not talking about enemies of the Jewish people, etc. In a normal situation, if you even lift up your hands, that is considered to be an act of a wicked person. You are wicked for doing that. Not only that, we know that in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash, in Jerusalem, it was forbidden to bring inside any types of metals. Any type of metal. Why is that? Because the Talmud tells us that metal is usually made into weapons, and weapons are to decrease lifespan. And the temple has come to increase, to bring peace, and to increase lifespan. In fact, if the nations of the world understood, it says in the Talmud, if the nations of the world understood the greatness of the temple, they would themselves send thousands of soldiers to protect the temple in Jerusalem, that nobody should harm the Jewish temple, because they understand the blessing that brings to all people. So, amazing thing. No metal is allowed in the temple. Not only that, it says in the Code of Jewish Law, in the laws of the blessing after the meal, that if a person has a knife on the table made out of metal, they should hide it or take it off the table. Why? Because once again, in our times when we do not have the temple, a person's table, a person's dining room table where they eat is considered to be as if it's an altar where the sacrifices were given to God, and it is able to forgive the sins of the Jewish people, just like that was the purpose of the sacrifices, were to forgive the Jewish people for any sins that they might have done. So in our times, what represents the service of God is the table which we eat. So therefore, just like in the temple, you're not allowed to bring in metal to the altar, so too, when you're saying the blessing over the meals, after the grace after the meals, you have to remove any metal utensils. So we see exactly the opposite. Not only that, an amazing thing. If you look in Hebrew, the word metal is barzel. But the Jewish people also have a barzel, but it's very different from, it's not the metal of the nations. They have the literal metal, which they have turned into weapons of mass destruction. We also have barzel, because if you look at the father of the Jewish people, Jacob, he had 4 wives, and if you take the first letter of each of the 4 wives, it spells out barzel. We have Bil'ah, we have Rachel, we have Zilpah, and we have Leah. So the Jewish people themselves, we also have a barzel. We also have a protection. Okay? It's the spirituality of the Jewish people. It's the heart of the Jewish people and soul of the Jewish people. That is our weapons. That is our real weapons. Doesn't mean that occasionally, of course, if we're in a world which comes to attack us, of course, then we also use literally also metal, barzel, or weapons to fight against the nations. But that is being forced upon us. That's not who we are. You know, that's not who we are. Many times I look back sometimes in my school days, and you meet up with a teacher, and when you're a kid, you look at him in a bad way. But after you get a little bit older, you see that what he was doing in the class is he just had to, you know, he had to make some order in the class. He had to calm the troops down. But that's not really who he was. If you wanted to know who he really was, get him after school, and then you'll see the true teacher. And really, teachers that I did see after school or invited us to their homes for various festivals, those people continue to be friends for many, many years to come. So, and finally, about Esav, we have the culture of Esav in an amazing source of our sages in a book called Shochar Tov, which is a book that goes through the Psalms of King David, 14:3, an amazing thing. It says, it brings down a verse in the book of Kings, that there was a person, a man, his name was Naval. Now Naval means like a villain type of person, a real lowlife. And then our sages tell us, you know who this Naval was? this Naval really is Esav. He's really Esav because they come from the same ilk. They are villains. They are vile. Why is that? The word Naval means to destroy. And the culture of Esav has really destroyed the heart and the good of the world. So many points of their culture. And our source goes on. Why do they call Esav Naval? A vile person, a villain, a lowlife? You know why? Because he filled the entire universe with nevelot, with death, with carcasses, with evil actions, vile actions. That's what he filled the entire universe with, that culture. And it goes on. He built houses of kotzin and houses of kilkalin. What are these? These are houses of prostitution. He brought into the world, he filled the universe with prostitution, with immodesty, sexual behavior. And he filled the world with houses of comedy and making light of everything and making a joke out of the entire world and serious matters. That's what he built, these stadiums of comedy and jokes. He filled the world with circuses. You know how much it's becoming, and past years it's come out, how much, for example, Barnum and Bailey, just a year or so ago at the close, they had many suits against them from animal lovers that they were cruel to animals. And that's what happens if you really look behind the circus. There's a lot of cruelty there. There's a lot of cruelty. They filled the world with idol worshipping. They filled the world with idol worshipping. Not only Christianity, but who knows, today there's so many tens of thousands of foreign religions. And last but not least, it says in the Tractate of Gittin 57:2 that if you ever see a war happening anywhere in the world, somewhere in the world, know that the hand of Esav is involved in that war. An amazing statement. If you ever see a war going on, know that behind the scenes there is a connection. It is Esav. It is Rome. It is the culture of Esav that is behind each and every war. Okay, so now that was the real source of this toxin America. Those are the real sources of it, of Western culture. But now let's look up close to the more recent roots of America. And unfortunately, we will see a very frightening picture. See a very frightening picture. Okay. Number one. We have, in America, we have a national holiday. President Nixon announced that the first Monday in October would be an official national holiday of America. It's called Columbus Day. Let's look at the man that discovered America, Christopher Columbus. Hold on, put on an additional seatbelt here, because we're going for a spin. By this time, accusations of tyranny and incompetence on the part of Columbus had also reached the courts. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand responded by removing Columbus from power and replacing him with Francisco de Bobadilla, a member of the Order of the Cultura Power. Bobadilla, who ruled as governor from 1500 until his death in a storm in 1502, had also been tasked by the court with investigations accusations of brutality made against Columbus. Bobadilla was immediately met with complaints about all three Columbus brothers, Christopher, Bartolomeo, and Diego. Bobadilla reported to Spain that Columbus regularly used torture and mutilation to govern Hispaniola. The 48 report, which could be found in the National Archives in the Spanish city of Simancas, contains testimonies from 23 people, including both enemies and supporters of Columbus, about the treatment of colonial subjects by Columbus and his brothers during their 7-year rule. According to the report, Columbus once punished a man found guilty of stealing corn by having his ears and nose cut off and then selling him into slavery. Testimony recorded in the report stated that Columbus congratulated his brother Bartolomeo on defending the family when the latter ordered a woman paraded naked through the streets and then had her tongue cut off for suggesting that Columbus was of a lowly birth. The document also describes how Columbus put down native unrest and revolt. He first ordered a brutal crackdown in which many natives were killed and then paraded their dismembered bodies through the streets in an attempt to discourage further rebellion. Columbus's government was characterized by a form of tyranny. Consuela Varela, a Spanish historian who has seen these documents, told journalists, even those who loved him, had to admit that the atrocities that had taken place under him. One more. A childhood friend reported in a letter that Columbus had provided one of the captured native Indian women to him. He wrote, a friend of Columbus, while I was in the boat, Columbus, captured a very beautiful woman who Columbus gave to me. When I had taken her to my cabin, she was naked, as was their custom. I was filled with desire to take my pleasures with her and attempted to satisfy my desire. She was unwilling and so treated me with her nails that I wished I had never begun. Scratched them. But to cut a long story short, then I took a piece of rope and whipped her soundly. And she let forth such incredible screams that you would not have believed your ears. Eventually we came to good terms. Yeah, I guess when you're getting the hell beaten out of you, you come to some kind of good terms. But there's more, and we go on. There are basically three major accusations against Columbus. What he did. Number one, use of violence and slavery. Two, second accusation against him, forcing people to convert to Christianity. Three, inducing diseases against the Indian population. Planting, so to speak, planting diseases amongst the Native Americans so that they would pass along these diseases and they would be killed in greater numbers. Those are the three major accusations of tyranny against him. Listen to this. By 1542, 15 years after Columbus's arrival, 250,000 Indians were exterminated. Got that? In a 50-year period of time. The entire Arawak tribe, Indian tribe Arawak, had been totally annihilated. That was the first group when Columbus sailed. That was the first group of Native Americans that he came in contact with, the Arawak tribe. Listen to this. By 1890, the Indian population in America had been cut to 300,000, down from 2.1 million in the time of Columbus in the 1500s. An amazing. By the way, that statistic, 2.1 million Indians, when Columbus first came to America, that statistic is very low. That is the lowest statistic of how many Native American Indians there were. There are even historians that claim there were 18 million Indians in the world. However way you slice it, within a 50-year period, to go down from 2.1 million to 300,000 Indians exterminated, that's an amazing accusation against Columbus. And this is our big hero. There are idols of him all around America, cities named after him, and what can we say more? A national holiday. First Monday in October, an amazing thing. Just finishing out the one more battle that I want to mention as far as the Indians are concerned is, go fast forwarding here, going past Columbus's time, we see that on December 29th, 1890, there was a battle. It was called the Wounded Knee Battle, where the Indians had surrendered to the Americans. The President of America, Harrison, he ordered thousands of troops to North Dakota, and they surrounded the Indian people. The Indian people surrendered. And even after surrendering, 250 to 300 Indians were murdered. Many of them women and many of them children. Till this day, believe it or not, there were about 15 American soldiers who received, it's hard for me to say these words, bravery awards from the American government. That, till this minute, till this day, they have never been rebuked. Those awards of bravery against women and children, and pretty much compared to the American weapons, unarmed. So that is really an amazing statistic. If you look today, really fast forwarding it up, the people that are mostly in prison, proportionally speaking, are blacks and American Indians, both males and females, unproportionately for their representation in the population. We'll get to that later with the statistics and amazing stuff. But just to see that these are groups that in America, these people were persecuted. And we see today the results of those early years. Okay, so that's Columbus, the big national hero of America, and slavery, and taking people's ears off and noses off, and coercing people to convert. Okay, let's move on. In America, to see the unfortunate living by the sword that Esav has perfected so much over the decades. So let's look at Civil War. Civil War, an amazing thing. The Civil War was 5 years. It went from if I'm not mistaken, 1861 to 1866, 67. And the Americans fighting Americans. Americans fighting Americans. What was one of the major reasons that there was a fight between Americans was due to the slavery of the black people, black Africans. That was basically the divider line, which eventually erupted in the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln wanted to abolish the slave status of the black Africans, and there were many that were against abolishing such laws, so they went to war. Now check this out. There was a war in the area of Maryland. It's called the Battle of Antietam. And in one day, this is the bloodiest day ever, Americans versus Americans, on September 17th, 1862, in one day, there were 23,000 casualties. 23,000 casualties in one day. That includes people being killed, people being injured, being maimed, etc. Now, during this 5 or 6 year period of the Civil War, the estimations of how many casualties there were stems somewhere between 500 and 700,000 American casualties. America versus America. An amazing thing. Let's look a little bit the violence, going further, the violence against blacks. As I said, the Civil War was a basic reaction to the will of some of the people to abolish the slavery of the black Africans. Okay, let's look. First of all, slavery in America, it began in the early 17th century, and it continued through the 18th century. Even after the abolishment of slavery in the year 1866, which was 1 year after the Civil War was over, the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, was formed. Now listen to this, an amazing thing. From 1866, 1 year after the Civil War, which slavery was abolished, till the early 1900s, not a lot of time, 40 years or so, thousands of blacks in the United States, especially in the South, were killed and hunted down and tortured. And all we have to do is look not too far back, Martin Luther King and the many, many laws in America that were biased and racist against black people. Okay, moving right along here. So we hit Columbus. We hit the Civil War. We hit slavery in America, going back to the 17th and 18th century, continuing in the 20th century, 19th and 20th century. Now, we have the Wild West. We have the Wild West. Wild West was represented by the sword of Esav, and you shall live by your sword. And nowhere did we see that more than in the Wild, Wild West. And there were guns, and more guns, and more guns. An amazing factor behind all these guns. In many, many places there were more guns than people in many, many communities, in many areas. What's an amazing thing is, if you have guns, which is bad enough, if the wrong people have guns in their hands, the bad guys have the guns, which is bad enough, but add that to alcohol, then you got a big, big problem here. Now alcohol, this is an amazing thing. The rate, many communities, many towns, many cities in these areas, they had in communities 50 saloons. Now, and we're talking about a population of 5,000 people. If you do the math, that means that for every 100 people, they built a saloon. For every 100 people, they built a saloon. Now we know that alcohol, when you look back in the Bible, when you look back in the Torah, excuse that Bible, when you look back in the Torah, we see when that alcohol is bad news for anybody. Noah, when he had too much alcohol, bad things happened to him via his son. So we know that the mixing guns and alcohol is a bad combination. The murder rate in these Wild West towns was 20 times more than big eastern cities. 20 times more. There was a law in these areas in the West. They had laws. It was called no duty to retreat law. No duty to retreat law. If somebody said something to you, if somebody looked at you, looked at you in the wrong way, the policy was, it's a fair fight. We could kill each other and it's fair. Why? No duty to retreat law. If you have a shootout, that's fine. If somebody died, 2 people died, 1 person died, they were not taken to court. They were not, nothing happened to them because that was the law. That was the law back then. Today, there's like a reincarnation of that in many places. I think it's called standing your ground law. Stand your ground law. Okay, and in the Wild West, we had a concept called the outlaws. You know, there's the in-laws, and sometimes there's the outlaws. Someday your in-laws are your outlaws, but that's for another time. Anyways, the outlaws, America, turned these outlaws, these cruel villains, they turned them into heroes, which is also interesting because if you take the numerical value of Esav, it comes to the same numerical value as peace, shalom in Hebrew. It's an amazing thing. So we could take a person who is vile and cruel and harasses and a murderer, and we could turn him into, oh, he's so peaceful, he's so lovely, he's such a special person. And that is exactly what America did to these outlaws. Check these out. Check out these names. Frank and Jesse James. Frank and Jesse James. They became folk heroes in America. Till this day, there are songs about the James brothers. Songs about them. There are cartoons about the James brother. Novels. And the reporters revered them. In fact, after Jesse was killed, after Jesse died, his brother Frank turned Jesse's home into a museum. You had to pay. There are pictures. You could look. Check it out on the internet. Amazing. Frank is making money, and people are coming and to pay money to see the folk hero of America. Yeah, Jesse James. Wow. Amazing. And who else do we have? Rabbi Kahana writes in his amazing book from 45 years ago, Time to Go. Time to Go Home. Rabbi Kahana writes on page 36, indeed, its outlaws, cruel, common, and vicious, became and still remain folk heroes for us. Both sheriff and outlaw symbolize the excitement of violence that is so American. The names of the outlaws and their bands are well known. Billy the Kid, the Younger Brothers, William Contrill, and the bloody raids in Kansas, the massacres of Indians, and vigilante lynchings of barely accused and untried persons. All these in the frontier of America gave rise to a tradition that accepted shooting and death as everyday events. Violence and its perpetrators were, at least unofficially, folk heroes. From outlaws, we reincarnate to gangsters. And of course, Al Capone. Al Capone responsible for 500 deaths of Americans. The darling of the media, Al Capone. He's so American, the reporter said. What's so amazing, he's so American. Oh my God. Yeah, living by the sword of Esav. Al Capone was asked by Hollywood to be a consultant for various gangster movies. Hollywood, no problem. Bring them in. We want you to be a consultant for us in Hollywood because we want to make the bucks. We want to make money. And violence sells. And there are more gangsters. Babyface Nelson, Pretty Boy Floyd, Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde. Thousands and thousands of people attended their funeral. Thousands and thousands of people attended their funeral. How many movies are out there glorifying Bonnie and Clyde? How about Ma Barker and her boys? What about John Dillinger? The media realized that violence sells papers. They glamorized the violence. They made evil people heroes. And worst of all, they desensitized, there we go, desensitized the public. And that is the worst. We won't even talk about today. This is going back, 100 years. But it's amazing today. People don't even, when you see murders live, when you see people being shot and blown away in blood, doesn't even move people today. Because the media has done a great job of desensitizing the public. And for that, definitely, there is no forgiveness. We have, to boot, we have the Watt riots in Los Angeles in 1965. Let's go on. What else is the source and root of America? We forget the eruption of violence and cruelty in both South and North. Not only in the lynchings of 3 terrified foreigners in the tiny town of Dry Diggings, in Dry Diggings, California of 1849, but in the draft riots in New York City during the Civil War that saw mobs swarm through the streets, hunting down blacks and killing 30 of them, while burning and looting and destroying. Not only in the lynching of blacks, symbolized by the death of Mac Parker in Mississippi, 1959, but the lynching of Leo Frank in Atlanta amid horrible outbursts, race riots against Mexicans in California that saw thousands of people surging through the streets in search of zoot suitors, and in the World War II race riots against blacks in Detroit. Violence is the way of and life for youth gangs that roam the streets, fighting, knifing, shooting, and killing out of boredom, racism, and hate. Today, as we say in Hebrew, kesef katan, all these outlaws, gangsters, war criminals, it's small change for today. Today we have the mass killers, we have the serial killers. Today, 10, 20, 30 people blow away in one shot, more. Let's look at some other frightening statistics. Let's look in the mirror today. Not such a pleasant sight. Guns, the sword, the metal of Esav when Isaac looked at his son, and he saw his son, and he saw for generations, and till the end of time, and he saw all of this line, and he saw their essence, and he saw what represented them most was the sword. You shall live by the sword. Violence, harassing, murder. Let's look at guns in America. America's the #1 country. If you look in the statistics, America's #1 in ownership of guns. There are more guns in America than people. It's not a joke. It's true. In America, arms per 100 people, there are 120.5 guns for every 100 people in America. There are 330 million Americans. There are 400 million guns out there. America, #1 with their love affair with those guns. Prisoners, #1, take it America. Gold medal goes to America. Prisoners, #1 in the world. 655 Americans out of every 100,000 persons in America are in prison. As we stand today in 2018, 2019, there are over 2 million Americans incarcerated. And this does not include youth figures. This does not include every day, any day you put your finger on the calendar, you want to check how many youths below the age of 18 are incarcerated in prisons or such forms of restraint areas. There are at least every day 60,000 under the age of 18. That's an amazing statistic. Another gold medal that America receives from the days of Aesop is domestic violence. America, #1 in domestic violence. Let's read some of the frightening statistics here. Amazing. This is up to date, up to 2018. Every year, more than 10 million men and women in the U.S. are subjected to domestic violence. Its impact can be felt far and wide. #1, more than 1 in 3 women, that's 35.6%, and more than 1 in 4 men, 28.5% in the U.S., report having experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an inmate partner in their lifetime. 2, nearly 20 people per minute in America are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this adds up to more than 10 million women and men being physically abused by an intimate partner. You know, they say friends like that who needs enemies. 3, nearly 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner during their lifetime. 4, this is amazing. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime in America. Amazing. 15% is right behind the closed doors. Against kids, against women, sometimes against men, as we see in the statistics. In 15 states, more than 40% of all homicides of women are the intimate partner is involved. Amazing statistic. 40% of all homicides against women, there's a former boyfriend or husband involved. 6, 85% of domestic violence victims are female and 15% are male. 7, women with disabilities have 40% greater risk of intimate partner violence, especially severe violence, than women without disabilities. 8, 2 in 5 gay or bisexual men will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetimes. 9, approximately 63% of homeless women have experienced domestic violence in their adult lives. 10, 28% of families were homeless because of domestic violence. Amazing stat. They're on the streets because of they can't live in their homes anymore. They're getting the blank out of them. 11. Nearly half of all women and men in the U.S. will experience psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Amazing, 50%. 12. Approximately 5 million children are exposed to domestic violence every year. Children exposed are more likely to attempt suicide, abuse drugs, alcohol, run away from home, engage in teenage prostitution, and commit sexual assault crimes. 13. 40% of the Center for Violence-Free Relationships domestic violence cases have children under 18 in the home. 14. Nationally, 50% of batterers who abuse their intimate partners also abuse their children. Half abuse their children in return. 15. Worldwide, men who were exposed to domestic violence as children are 3 or 4 times more likely to perpetrate intimate partner violence as adults. It just keeps on rolling, generation after generation. 16. 81% of women and 30% of men who experience rape, stalking, or physical violence by an intimate partner reported significant short or long-term impact such as post-traumatic stress, disorder symptoms, and injuries. 17. Only 1 out of 3 people who are injured during a domestic violence incident will ever receive medical care for their injuries. And this is amazing. Most cases of domestic violence are never reported to the police. Oh man, look at all these statistics. And the last one is the whopper, man. Most of them are even reported. They're beating men, they're beating kids, their loved ones. Amazing. Last but not least, looking in the mirror. Sometimes it's not so pleasant, but you gotta do it. And Gillette, the last one, this is for you. Sports. Sports in America. Amazing. Billion-dollar industry. How much are boxers offered? There's different leagues and rates, and how much are they offered? To do what? To beat the blank out of each other. And how many people come to see it? What are the revenues? Making the bucks on the violence. Media, newspapers, computers. Boxing. Seeing people and cheering as they get knocked out. But we're not alone. Today, a new phenomena. How so popular, up and coming, MMA. MMA. Someone recently told me about that. I thought he meant like mama or something, you know, but it ain't mama. This mixed martial arts. Amazing. People with not boxing gloves on, just like it looks like when you're riding a bike. When a person rides a bike, yeah, you know, they have a little glove there for the handlebars of the bike, so they have something like little on their hands. You got to see this to believe it. You cannot believe your eyes. People killing each other, and the crowds loving it, and it's on TV, and it's on the computers, and they're selling. And it's not enough. After they knock out a guy, they're still going after him. The guy's unconscious, and they're still jumping on. The referee has to save the guy's life. Living by the sword, living by the violence. Wrestling, same idea. The fans cheering. The fans cheering. Whether it's real or not, that's not the point over here. Okay? For most people, for a lot of people, that the spectators, they think that it's real. And the cheers and the fans. Look at hockey, waiting for the violence, and the crowd, they love it. And when they take off their gloves and the hockey players begin to kill each other, we're so desensitized that it doesn't even hit us. Oh, the guy got hit right in the face, you know, he probably feels that for the next couple of weeks. You know, might have taken out some of his teeth. How many people were injured? And stars, sports stars, and they're having all kinds of mental trouble, etc., from all of these hits. You look at football. It's an amazing thing. Looking from Torah eyeglasses. It's an amazing thing. You know, like you look, they could, there's a player, he makes a catch, a wide receiver, one of the players makes a catch, and like, okay, like, take him out of bounds. No, they're not going to take you out of bounds, like, okay, you know, just like a little push over here, push out of bounds. No, they're going to take their helmets and all their shoulder pads, baby, and they're going to make you fly off the field. It's an amazing, if you think about it. People hitting each other. People, you know, 5, 6 guys tackling one guy, hitting each other. This is the, just a few days ago, 100 million people, which is like actually not a lot. It was one of the lower viewed Super Bowls. 100 million Americans sitting down and watching what? Watching people hitting each other, you know, and the more you hit them and the more you tackle them and get them down and throw them on the floor, the more cheers you receive. So that, dear Gillette, if you're looking to point the finger, at the white male population, of course, it is correct. The white male population is responsible for many. If you look at figures in prison between men and women, it's totally, you know, you have maybe 8% are women in the 2.1 million prisoners in America today. Only 8% are women. And if you look at some of these boxing or the MMA stuff, it's a minority that are women. It is true, there's a lot of toxin activities by the males. But understand that Gillette, that your society, your culture, your America, your founding fathers, and it continues today, the gangs and the violence. And it's worse today. The video games that kids watch. Because it all is so glamorous. It all sells paper. It's so American. Wanted to finish with the words of Rabbi Kahana 45 years ago. We watch in the daily television programs, these are the good days, what would the rabbis say today with the computers, and movies we love so much, with their violence, murder, and sadistic brutality, in senseless vandalism and beatings of people. It is present in students flocking to beaches and festivals and exploding into fights and wild, aimless violence. In the toys of death our children play with daily. It is present in the total collapse of respect for authority and the disappearance of fear of defying or attacking authority. In the physical assaults on teachers by students and the murderous attacks upon the police. And then there's a special danger in every violent and brutal society, the police officer. The men who have been given the legal right to use guns beat people to enforce their will. Blessed with many decent men, these forces are also cursed with too many others who are dangerous to democracy, who only wait for an opportunity to do violence. Rabbi Kahana, the first page of his book, he writes the following. And this, Jewish friends, should be a message. The book, Time to Go Home. This is perhaps the most important book I shall ever write, for it may save many lives. but is surely the saddest, for it may not. It is dedicated with loyalty to the America that gave so many millions freedom, democracy, and a new life, with deepest respect and love for what was, and with somber sense of loss and tragedy for what it has become. There's an amazing, we have time for, okay. There's an amazing Magen Avram. It's also found even earlier in the Tosfot, some of the Tosfot. And he asks a question. I don't understand. The Tosfot and the Magen Avram, these commentators, they ask a question. I don't understand. How in the world does Isaac bless Esav with the blessing? What kind of blessing is this to live by your sword? We see those seeds. We're reaping the seeds of this Esav nation, this Esav culture in America and Europe, all over. Comes to Israel. Not on such a high scale, but it's here. How could this be? Didn't Isaac think that Esav was a righteous person and that's why he wanted to bless him? So what is this blessing? Who ever heard of giving someone, can you imagine a judge stands up in court, there's a mass murderer before him, and he blesses him that you should live by the sword. I mean, can you imagine that guy? You'd be thrown out of his office. What is this going on? This is an amazing idea. The Tosfot and the Magen Avram, they both say the same idea. The word in Hebrew that you shall live by your sword, al. In Hebrew it could be also understood as lin'ol, to lock up. How do we solve this terrible situation? We have a society, a country. We saw its foundations. We saw its roots. Is there any wonder why America looks like it does today? So how do we step out of this box? How do we get out of this terrible situation? So listen to this. What Isaac was telling him, that if you want to live, you better lock up your sword. That was the blessing to Esav. Al charbecha tichyeh. Not that you shall live and use the sword and live by it and bring wars to the world and weapons of guns and swords and massive tanks and airplanes. Isaac did bless him. If you want to be blessed, then you better lock up. Al, nal, close up. And lock up your sword and your knife, because that is the only hope for the Western culture and society, to lock it up. Till next week.